Good morning, everyone. It's Coach Lamons. I decided to put something together to show everyone how Texas can stop the RPO offense that Kansas is going to be running this week. I also wanted to discuss some things that Oklahoma did with their formations and with some motion that put Texas's defense under stress and how they didn't really have a good game plan for that and they didn't execute well. And how we can kind of clean that up going to Kansas. Now, for the purposes of this presentation, the field side will always be to the right. So that is the field side, and that will not change for the entire presentation. So here I have Texas's base defense drawn up against 10 personnel. Now, I'm going to say that 20 personnel, you would defend it the same way as long as the backs are in the backfield. If they put a back right up here outside of the tackle or right here outside of the tackle, you would defend that back just like a tight end. But if the backs are not in that position, you will defend them like you would a slot receiver and treat it just like 10 personnel. And that does not change. So basically, you don't make adjustments for 20 personnel. You either treat it like 11 personnel if the back is in the position of a tight end, or if the back is in the position of a true back in the backfield, you're going to treat it as a slot receiver and treat it as 10 personnel. So let's get started. First, I'm going to talk about pass coverage. So I have what we call combo man. It's very similar to blue coverage, but it's not a true blue coverage in that when they show run, the safeties know if they get run keys that they do not have any help from the linebackers. So they have to go with anybody running any slants or curls to the inside with run keys. So with the RPO, a lot of teams will do that. They will run a slant or a curl right behind a run read, and they'll read these backers here to determine if they're going to pass the ball or they're going to indeed hand it off and run the ball. So they're going to run with number 2 if he releases inside. In blue coverage, everybody is reading number 2. That's the second receiver. It would be your H receiver here or your Y receiver here. So they're reading number 2, and depending on what he does, they're going to react. So if number 2 releases to the outside, the cornerback has number 2, and the safety will now have number 1. If number 2 does anything else, the cornerback is basically man-to-man on number 1, and the safety is man-to-man on number 2 against a run read. If they have a pass read, it's totally different. I'm not going to discuss that here. So one popular play that they run is this little bubble screen where the H receiver, I'm going to change my color here so that you guys can see it, where the H receiver runs a little bubble. They can run it to either side of the field. It could be the Y receiver. The X receiver is going to block the cornerback. So you see the H receiver went outside. So this cornerback is going to have to defeat this block to the outside, keeping his outside shoulder free, and come up and play this H receiver. The safety is going to migrate this way a little bit. He's looking for any type of release by the X receiver. He's going to be blocking the cornerback. He's watching also the quarterback. When the quarterback releases the ball, he's going to press to close this gap and help the cornerback make a play. Your nickel is going to be coming in here looking at run. He will also get over here once the ball is thrown and be ready to make a play. So now let's talk about the run reads. So we're going to start from the inside out here. Your nose has double A-gap responsibility. He's going to hit the center, and he's going to feel for any double teams or for pressure from the center, wherever the center is trying to get position on him, and he's going to defeat that block and migrate to that side of the field. If he feels pressure from the field side, he's going to get into the field side A-gap. Pressure from the boundary side, he's going to get into the boundary side A-gap. Now, your Mike linebacker is also checking this boundary side A-gap. He's making sure that that gap is closed. We have a saying in the linebacker room, if you see air, you're there. So if this Mike linebacker sees air in A-gap, he's got to get into that A-gap. If he doesn't see air, he's going to go with the flow, which means he's either going to go to the field side. It flows to the field side. Once again, looking for any air in this area of the field that he can get into. If he sees that air, chances are the running back sees it too, and that running back thinks that's a hole. The Mike linebacker needs to step into that hole and fill it and be waiting for that running back when he cuts back. And if flow is to the boundary side, he will stack this defensive end, looking for any air flowing inside out to the football, which means basically he's gonna let this running back cross his face going towards the sideline, and he's gonna stay inside shoulder or 1 to 2 yards inside the running back. Depending on how fast that running back is running, he's got to maintain inside leverage. And if the running back is running faster, the linebacker needs to maintain more inside leverage, meaning he's going to give himself more room to the inside of that running back. So when that running back does cut back, he does not overrun the play. If the running back's not running as fast, he does not need as much room to stop his momentum and make the tackle. So the rover here doesn't have any real run responsibility. He's just looking for air. And if flows 2, he's going to stack this defensive end. He's going to check this running back, see where the running back is heading. If the running back is going outside, he's going to get inside out on that running back and go make the play. If the running back's running more of an inside zone type of look here, he's looking at A gap. If this nose has migrated here, he will probably see air in that A gap, and he's going to get in that. Now, if the flow's outside, he doesn't need to worry about this A gap because he's got the Mike linebacker coming back over here. And if this A gap's open, chances are the nose is in this A gap. So the Mike linebacker would see the air in this A gap and come here, and he would be there for the cutback. If the Mike linebacker sees air in this A gap, he's going to shoot the gap. But once again, if flow's hard outside, he's going to get flat down the line and try and make a play in here. So either way, the rover doesn't really need to worry about A gap if the flow's outside. If the flow is inside, he may, especially on an inside zone play, need to get in that A gap to make a play. Your ends are both in 4 eyes here, and they have B gap responsibility. They're going to take on a block from that offensive tackle and get B gap. And then your force players is your B backer and your nickel. All right, so let's clean this up and look at some different scenarios. Let's look at flow to the field side first. So flows to the field side, my nose is going to take on this block. He's going to feel pressure and get into the field side A gap. My end taking on this block, getting field side B gap. My rover is stepping to stack the end. He's looking for flow, and he's looking, if flow is towards the A gap, he's going to look to fill that A gap. If there's no air, he's not going to step into the A gap. He's going to stay stacked on this end, waiting for the running back to commit, either to bouncing outside back to the boundary, or what we call a cutback back to the boundary, or bouncing it outside to the field, and then he's going to go flow and make that play. Here we'll assume that he bounces to the field. The Mike linebacker is stacking A gap. With flow away, he should see air right there, and he's going to shoot that hard, and he's going to get flat down the line. And I have seen a lot of linebackers make a lot of plays on very speedy running backs doing that. I know it looks really hard, but this running back's angle allows you to make up some room on him when you play this with the proper technique, and that's actually a really good way to play the run, is shooting this A gap when there's air. It keeps you from getting blocked. You can get right in there and go flat down the line of scrimmage and use your speed to catch that running back, and some angles as well if the running back has more speed than you do. The nickel is your force player, flows to the field, so he's got to turn that back. That's going to help both of these linebackers in here get to the football. The end is going to take on this block, and he's going to get right in here. He's looking for any cutback. He can slow trail the play, but he's got to make sure that if there's any type of reverse or counter coming back this way, that he's in a position to stop that. He's really looking for that type of motion, but he is going to trail that play slow. And once he validates that there's nothing coming back to him, he'll come up and make the play. And the B backer is the force player, and he is doing the same thing as Ian. He's looking for any type of reverses or counters, throwbacks, any trickery that the offense might try and throw in there. Your safeties are looking at the pass first, playing their blue coverage just like we talked about, and the corners as well. But once they validate that running back actually indeed has the ball and there's no threat, they're going to take an angle. The safety will once again look for any trick play to the backside. He's actually going to stay put and kind of migrate back this way, and then probably get over here and get an angle. This safety would come up, and the cornerback is going to play a force type of player here. So that's how you defend flow to the field side. So now let's look at how we will play flow to the boundary against this 10 or 20 personnel. So with flow to the boundary, once again, your nose is going to take on the block of the center, and he is going to migrate into A gap. And I'm going to draw this up this way for you so you can see what the Mike linebacker is seeing. The end is going to take on the block of the tackle and migrate into B gap. Your B backer is going to come up and play force. So your Mike linebacker, he's checking A gap, but he is going to see a solid wall of defenders right here. And this running back is going to see that too. So he is most likely going to do one of two things. He's going to cut back here, in which case your rover sees an open A gap, at least he should, and he is going to be right there waiting for him. And the Mike linebacker is also going to, as he migrates this way a little bit, he sees a cutback, he's going to come back and get over the top here as well. Or this running back's going to try and bounce it outside, in which case the Mike linebacker will come over the top and make the tackle here, looking for any air. If this B backer gets up the field, this Mike linebacker will see air in C gap, and he'll get in there and make the play. So that's what he's seeing with flow to the boundary. The end is taking on B gap responsibility. He's going to engage the offensive tackle, get in B gap, looking for any trickery coming back across the formation. The nickel is getting into D gap and looking for any type of counters, reverses, or throwbacks. So that's basically the run defense against 10 personnel. We already talked about how we're going to play the pass against 10 personnel. Once again, it works against 20 personnel as well, as long as that tight end is not on the line of scrimmage. So now let's look with a tight end to the field. So if we have a tight end to the field, we've got to make some adjustments. We've still got 4 eyes with the 2 defensive ends. Our nickel's going to come in a little bit tighter. He's going to play outside shoulder of the tight end, and he's still got force. He's not covering the pass. This safety to the field side is now in what we call a C8 technique. He is 8 yards from the line of scrimmage over C gap. And he has C gap run responsibility. He also has that tight end basically man. He's still in blue if the tight end does release to the outside, but the biggest play in the RPO game is that bubble screen. The tight end's not going to run a bubble screen. So he's looking at that tight end. He's really looking to take away this seam here. The tight end could run some sort of curl or some sort of slant. He's going to take that away as well. So if the tight end runs anything like that, basically the nickel still has the run responsibility, and he's got force, but there is no C gap because the tight end's gone. So the safety doesn't have a C gap to worry about, so he's just going to pick up the tight end. The end is in B gap. He's a 4-eye. The nose is still double A gap. Your linebacker responsibilities don't really change from 10 personnel. Still checking A gap and flowing whichever way the play flows. Looking for any green grass in this area that you need to get into to fill a hole. Checking A gap, flowing to the play, or flowing this way to the play. So an additional note here is if this tight end does release and run some sort of RPO route, the safety's taking himself out of the run game. So this rover will probably see a hole in C gap, and he can get in there as well and make a play on the running back there if they do indeed hand the ball off. So you have one less blocker in there, and you have your nickel back who's playing force, and your rover that can play that C gap as well. So you're still pretty solid on the outside. And on this side of the field, you still have your blue coverage with your safety and your cornerback. And like I said, we're basically man here. If the tight end does release outside and run some sort of out on an RPO, which I don't really see a lot of, but if you do, this cornerback will step up and play him. and this safety will have to fight back over the top for number one. They could run some sort of stick type of motion on this RPO in which a safety would have to come up on that curl, but he doesn't want to come up too fast because if there's a double move, he'll get beat deep and there's nobody back there to help. So let's look at it with flow to the field side. Flow to the field side, your nose is going to feel pressure field side and get into field side A gap. The end is going to take on this block and get into B gap. The nickel is playing force. The safety is reading this tight end and coming up to C gap. And once again, if this tight end blocks, the safety's coming up to this C gap, but he's got to make sure that tight end doesn't block and then show block and then run into that seam. The rover's going to come over the top. He's going to stack this end looking for flow. If flows to the inside, he's going to see if there's any air that way. If not, he's going to read that running back's cut and flow to the ball. Mike linebacker most likely will see a hole in A gap. He sees air in A gap. He's getting in that air and flowing to the ball. If he does not see an air in A gap, he'll stack this nose and migrate here looking for any openings in this area that he can get into and make a play. Taking on the block, looking for any type of misdirection, and he is also looking for any type of misdirection. We do have to be very wary in this situation of this tight end coming off, especially he may show block. If he's showing block, it's probably going to look like he's blocking this rover and then getting up in the seam. So the safety has to be very careful of that. And that's why we say our rover does not have any gap responsibility, because he does have to help with A gap. It flows that way. But if that running back runs anywhere outside of B gap, this rover's got to be ready to get in C gap and fill that if there's any air there that he can see. And if not, he'll just continue to pursue to the outside. Now let's look at flow to the field with the tight end, flow to the boundary with the tight end to the field. You're going to see this nose take on the block and get into A gap. The end's going to take on the block of the tackle and get into B gap. Your B backer is playing force. Your Mike linebacker once again sees a wall of players. He's going to get in here and stack this in. He's not going to see any hole here. There won't be air there if the nose does his job. He's going to stack this end, and he's going to look once again. Either he's going to bounce, and if the running back bounces, he's probably going to either see an opening here that he can get in and force the issue, or he's going to come over the top of this B backer and play it here. Or the running back could cut back. If the running back cuts back, Mike's going to come this way and make a play, most likely in A gap. Your rover's checking A gap. He's probably going to see air. He's going to get in it. Once again, if this guy cuts back, he'll be there to make the play along with the Mike linebacker. You have your end in a 4-eye. He's going to take on that block, get into B gap looking for any misdirection. Your nickel is once again in B gap. Safety has C gap, but he's really looking RPO. And this is where they're more likely going to throw that seam on the RPO. They're going to try and get this rover flowing this way to the ball, and they're reading him and looking for that seam, and the safety will squat and he'll stay put watching for this tight end to the release. If he does release, he'll be there to take away the seam play. Oklahoma likes to do that a lot, and I imagine that Kansas will do some of that as well, although we didn't see it from Oklahoma too much last week. So now we're going to talk about the tight end to the boundary. Oklahoma used several different formations with the tight end to the boundary to get Texas out of position. Now, the first thing I'm going to point out here is that you have your B backer to the field side. You have a single receiver to the field side. They're in 21 personnel. They're really in 20 personnel, but this wide receiver right here is playing like a tight end, so I'm going to treat him like a tight end. He's got the same splits as a tight end. I'm going to call him a tight end. They have 5 guys in the box. Texas has 5 guys in the box. Well, to me, this is a run formation. Oklahoma's trying to run the ball out of this formation. They have 5 guys in the box. Their safeties are 12, 13, 14 yards off the line of scrimmage. You can see this safety here. The other one, you can barely see a shadow in the screen. This isn't a good formation to defend this play against the run or even if they're passing the ball. First of all, Joseph Asai is the B-backer. He doesn't play this position. This is the nickel's position because the nickel's a faster type of player, and he's got more ground to cover. So you're putting Asai kind of in a weird position. Now, if you're blitzing, you can see it's 2nd and 10. If you're blitzing on some sort of 3rd and long or something like that, you're trying to bring pressure, then sure. This may be a formation that you use to bring pressure and just let Asai. You think they're passing the ball anyway, he can play right here at this hash and play some coverage. You'd have some coverage here. And then you've got one of these 3 guys that can blitz. And then the other ones are going to be playing coverage on number 1 and number 2 here. But that's not what they're doing. They're just playing basically a base defense, and they've got guys out of position. So let me clean this up a little bit, and we'll see what Oklahoma does here to really get these guys out of position. Just cleaning this up. And we're going to see CeeDee Lamb goes in motion across the formation. And when he does, Asai becomes responsible for him as number 2. Man, this safety's playing center field, staying deep, but he becomes Osai's man. Oklahoma's going to run a flea flicker here and give him a run read. And Osai's going to come up on the run, as he should. He's a linebacker. He's going to come up on the run to stop the run. CeeDee Lamb goes in motion. Nobody picks him up. He runs a wheel out here. So in my rules, this safety would be responsible for number 2 if he does anything but go outside. If he goes outside, which in this case, he runs that little wheel route, that's going outside, the cornerback would come pick up number 2. He would actually pick him back here. He wouldn't step up to him because he's running full speed. And this receiver runs a post. The safety would come up and play the post. But that's not what happens. Asai plays the run. The safety goes back to center field, way back 25 yards deep, and the cornerback stays with the post. And CeeDee Lamb is wide open. So let's watch the play. See Osai step up to that, and 25, 30 yards down the field, you see your safety trying to make the play. Nobody picks up CeeDee Lamb. Once again, the defense was out of position, and it was just a really, really bad play design defensively. So now, later in the game, in the 4th quarter, they've shown that look. Texas is trying to adjust. But once again, they've got Brandon Jones playing against 21 personnel. You've got the tight end right here, a running back right here, and all you have is your nickel back against these 2 backs, two bigger blocking type of offensive players. You got your cornerback playing CeeDee Lamb. Here your safety is in a C8, 8 yards off the line of scrimmage. He's got C-gap. Right. And then to the field side, you've got a defensive end and 2 linebackers with 2 offensive linemen. And you've got right down the middle, these guys, they're not field or boundary. So you've got 1, 2, 3 blockers here and 3 players here. You've got no skill blockers to this side. Well, you could consider the running back 1 and 3 players here for that 1 skill blocker. Oklahoma has numbers to the boundary, and they have size to the boundary as well. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to use motion, just like they did on that flea flicker, to draw Texas's eyes away from the point of attack, and then they're going to run a counter. So CeeDee Lamb's going to motion again, just like he did before. Texas is thinking, oh, well, they may be running some sort of pass back to CeeDee Lamb, and their secondary is going to adjust. You're going to see Brandon Jones actually steps back in here, even though he's really the sole box defender on this side of the field, and aside from this defensive end right here. And it's going to wind up being a big play for Oklahoma. You see the cornerback runs across the field with CeeDee Lamb, and that takes him out of the play as well. So it wound up being a 42-yard rush that set up the last touchdown drive. So the very next play, Oklahoma comes out again, and this time they're in 20 personnel, and they've got 2 receivers into the boundary, one of them being CeeDee Lamb. And Texas still hasn't adjusted. They have their B-backer into the field. They've only got 5 men in the box, even though there's 20 personnel. So there's 8 offensive players in the box and 5 Texas players in the box. They have a safety way back in center field off the screen. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Texas players in the screen. And 1 safety way back here. There's 6 minutes left in the game, and you're down by 7, and you're not even putting your players up in a position to play the run. So once again, they're going to motion CeeDee Lamb across. Texas's eyes are going to get attracted to CeeDee Lamb. They're just running a little split zone. The running back to the boundary side is going to get the ball. He's going to run to the field side, looking at that field side A gap. It's closed, and he cuts back for a big gain. And the field side running back is actually coming across the formation and kicking out on the nickel back who's playing there. So let's watch it. Nickelback does a good job, but as contact comes, he kind of shuffles backwards, and that opens up the gap to make the play. Once again, he's not that type of defender. The linebacker, the B-backer, Joseph Asai, would be a much better defender to make that play. And the motion with CeeDee Lamb draws eyes from Texas to get their defense out of position on making that play. But the biggest thing is they didn't have the right number of people close to the line of scrimmage. So with the tight end to the boundary, what I want to do is I want to put my B-backer in a position to play force to the boundary side. I'm going to have my safety to the boundary side in that C8 technique, and he still has the tight end manned if the tight end releases. But the B-backer's job is to get hands on that tight end and slow down any release he may have. And then he's going to play the force here if Flo's his way, or he's looking for any type of throwbacks if Flo goes to the field side. So your nose is still double A gap. He's going to go with wherever he feels the flow going. Your ends are going to engage the offensive tackle and play B-back. Your Mike has A gap, and then he's going to flow to the ball, or A to scrape as we call it. Your Rover's going to check A gap and then flow to the ball, A to scrape. And your nickel has force to the field side. So when the offense is in this formation, I really expect them to run to the boundary. That's why they put the tight end to the boundary. They want to run to the boundary. Now I want to talk quickly about motion out of this. If the Z receiver, like CeeDee Lamb did, motions to the field side, very simply, I roll my coverage. My nickel back now has him man, and the safety and corner are still blue on number 1 and number 2. And this safety here This cornerback's just going to come here, and he's going to play off the edge. This safety here is still a C6. If they do run back this way, he's going to come and be in C gap. So in the case of the Oklahoma, they ran counter, you would have a block down. Let me clear this up a little bit so we can see it better. They would block down here. This end would take on that block and try and fill B gap. They're going to double the nose and then come off on the rover. You see the double team and then coming up to the rover. This nose is going to fight that double team and try and split it into A gap. So you'll have a guy in B gap here, guy in A gap here. The rover, this guy's pulling. He's trying to kick out the B backer. The B backer is going to come up. He's actually going to wrong shoulder that. That would put him like right in here. He's turning up, trying to take on this Mike. The Mike sees some air here. He's getting right in here. Your rover's probably, he sees these guys pulling. He's coming right in here. Lamb's across the formation, so your nickel back has him man. These guys are over here playing man here. But your cornerback's out here. And your safety's coming right up in here. So you've got numbers, and you can defend that rushing play that CeeDee Lamb had. So now let's say they try and run. We talked about flow to the boundary. Now let's say that they try and run a play to the field. Your nose is going to take on this block, and he's going to migrate to A gap. Your end is in B gap. Your nickel has force, but in this case, they motioned across. So he's really man on that Z receiver. He's going to come up and take on that Z receiver. And depending on what that Z receiver does, he may or may not be back in coverage. Your end is in B gap. B backer's really taking on this tight end and looking for any throwbacks, but they got to be aware, both the safety and the B backer, of that tight end seam with flow going away. Cornerback's coming down here, and he's going to trail the play. Your rover's checking A gap, but if flow's hard outside, he's got to get out there because of that motion, he knows that this nickel may be gone. Mike should see a gap in A gap and get flat and go play that. If not, he'll get over the top. So you've got a pretty solid play, and these guys right here are just blue on these guys right here. So you've got that all shored up. Additionally, if they run something like this with that flea flicker look, your safety, there's a good chance he's going to come over the top and play this, and then nickel's got to look at number 2 as if he's number 3 now. They're going to banjo that play, and they'll make a banjo call on the field, and they'll switch responsibilities. The H receiver will now become number 3. So there you have it, folks. That's how Texas can defend some RPO looks, how they can clean up some of their mistakes and some of the things they did against Oklahoma. They've got to really put more size, 6 guys in the box. You really need this B-backer to the boundary side of the field, especially with the tight end of the boundary, to keep them from running to the boundary, force them to go to the field side where they have fewer blockers.